She had it all: fame, fortune, a royal title, and a deal that promised to cement her legacy in Hollywood history. But within mere months, Meghan Markle watched everything begin to unravel. The glamour of the royal name she once carried started to tarnish. The media empire she envisioned slipped through her fingers. And now, with Netflix pulling the plug on her $150 million deal, what was left was more than just a bruised ego. It was a woman in search of redemption, power, and maybe, just maybe, survival. There's something strangely familiar about watching a star fall. The very people who once cheered, applauded, and adored her were now sharpening their knives, eagerly waiting to see her stumble. But Meghan wasn't going to disappear quietly into the shadows. No, not Meghan. She had something else in mind. Something or someone. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In a city like Los Angeles, where secrets are currency and power is never where it seems, whispers began to surface. A meeting had taken place. Not a chance encounter at a gala or an innocent brunch at Soho House. This was different. Private, carefully arranged, hidden behind the velvet curtains of one of LA's most exclusive hotels. And at the center of it all, Markus Anderson. For years, Markus has been known as Meghan's closest confidant, the man in the background. Always there, always watching, always guiding. But this time, he wasn't just the friend offering a shoulder to cry on. He was the gatekeeper. The one who opened the door to a billionaire many say holds more sway than any media mogul in town. A man 3 decades Meghan's senior. A man with everything to offer and everything to gain. But why? Why would Markus orchestrate such a meeting? Why would Meghan agree to it? And most importantly, what was on the table behind those closed hotel doors? Before we get there, you have to understand the stakes. Only a few years ago, Meghan Markle was being hailed as the new face of modern royalty. Her wedding to Prince Harry was broadcast to hundreds of millions. She was the symbol of change in an institution steeped in tradition. She wasn't just marrying into the royal family, she was rewriting it. But fairy tales, especially in the real world, tend to have a short shelf life. The royal life became suffocating. Accusations flew. Interviews were given. A dramatic exit was staged. Meghan and Harry left the palace behind and moved to California, proclaiming a fresh start, one rooted in independence, creativity, and humanitarian impact. Netflix, eager to cash in on the royal exodus and eager to appear progressive, signed the pair for an eye-watering $150 million. The world expected documentaries, children's programs, gripping human interest content, something with soul and sophistication. What they got instead was underwhelming. One series, a few announcements, and endless delays. Critics were harsh. Executives grew frustrated. Deadlines came and went. Meghan's creative control reportedly clashed with producers. Promised content never arrived. Her animated project was shelved before it began. Even Spotify, which had partnered with the couple for their podcast series, quietly stepped away after lackluster performance. Behind the scenes, there were murmurs. Meghan wanted to be Oprah, or at least Reese Witherspoon. A visionary, a mogul, someone whose name alone drew both reverence and deals. But in Hollywood, dreams and dollars don't always align. And when Netflix finally pulled the plug, it wasn't just a contract cancellation. It was a very public rebuke. A message, loud and clear: the Meghan and Harry brand was not as invincible as it once seemed. For Meghan, this wasn't just a financial hit. It was personal. Her image had already taken a beating in the British press. Now, even the liberal Hollywood circles were whispering. Was she difficult to work with? Was she out of touch? Was her star fading? Enter Markus Anderson. He's been described as the man who introduced Meghan to the right people. He's the Soho House insider, the connector, the friend who doesn't just know the doors to open. He holds the keys. He's fiercely loyal, fiercely protective, and quietly powerful. He's not a celebrity, but in elite circles, he's the man who decides who becomes one. And now, as Meghan found herself adrift, Markus reappeared. And not just for damage control. He had a plan, a discreet dinner, a billionaire contact, an invitation delivered through back channels. No PR fanfare, no publicists, no leaks. Just a driver, a private suite, and a whispered opportunity. The billionaire in question is something of an enigma. He's rarely photographed, rarely quoted. His influence is not in headlines, but in boardrooms. A major investor in media, pharmaceuticals, and political lobbying, known to be ruthless, brilliant, and utterly immune to scandal. He's helped fallen stars rise again. He's known to collect people, talented, ambitious, desperate people. And Meghan? She was now all three. We don't yet know what was discussed in that meeting. We don't have the transcripts or recordings. But we do have patterns. Patterns of power being exchanged behind smiles and cocktails. Deals that aren't announced with press releases, but whispered about in elite gatherings. Alliances that change the course of reputations, careers, and sometimes even nations. Could this be Meghan's secret weapon? A strategic realignment away from Netflix and toward private influence? Was this about producing? Financing? Or was something else on the table? Something more personal, more intimate? And what about Harry? Was he informed? Was he consulted? Or was this a solo play? The royal silence since the Netflix fallout has been deafening. No statements. No interviews. No red carpet appearances. Just a series of sightings. Meghan alone in LA, Markus by her side, and whispers of movement in legal and business circles. Some say Meghan is regrouping. Others say she's desperate. But everyone agrees she's not done. Not by a long shot. And this billionaire, whoever he truly is, may just be the next chapter of her story. Or the end of it. Because the question isn't just what Meghan wants. It's what she's willing to give for it. And that is where our story truly begins. It began with fireworks and champagne. The kind of announcement that echoes across continents and sets Hollywood buzzing. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, fresh off their dramatic royal exit, signed a multi-year deal with Netflix reportedly worth $150 million. Industry insiders called it historic. Critics called it strategic brilliance. The Sussexes themselves described it as a partnership that would inspire, inform, and uplift. In the aftermath of Megxit, this Netflix deal was seen as their golden parachute, a way to control their own narrative, to deliver impactful content, to launch a global media brand without the shackles of royal protocol. It was supposed to be the first pillar of their new empire. No longer just royals, but influencers, activists, and producers, people who shaped the conversation. But from the moment ink met paper, something felt uncertain. There were questions. Could two people whose fame came primarily from their ties to the monarchy really build a compelling content empire? Did they have the creative chops, the industry savvy, and the execution to pull it off? These doubts didn't surface publicly right away. At first, everyone wanted to believe. The announcement alone gave Netflix a PR boost. Stocks surged. Twitter exploded. Meghan and Harry's fans, an army of loyal defenders, praised their courage and foresight. But behind closed doors at Netflix headquarters, executives were waiting for pitches, for scripts, for production schedules. What they got, however, was delay after delay. Meghan had grand visions, animated series, powerful documentaries, human interest stories. She reportedly wanted to tell stories that championed women, children, and social justice. But those concepts remained vague, often trapped in development limbo. The animated series Pearl, for example, was announced to great fanfare, a show about a young girl inspired by influential women in history. It was supposed to be a cornerstone of their mission. And yet, just a year later, Netflix canceled Pearl before a single frame had been produced. Quietly, with little explanation, it was dropped during a wave of cutbacks. Internally, executives cited creative differences and lack of development progress. Externally, some suspected that Meghan's team struggled to navigate the realities of high-stakes production. This was the first red flag, but it was far from the last. When the couple finally delivered their highly anticipated docuseries, Harry and Meghan, the viewership was strong in the first week. Curiosity sells. But reviews were mixed. Critics accused the series of being self-indulgent, overly controlled, lacking true vulnerability. There were complaints that the show rehashed familiar grievances instead of offering fresh insight. Even worse, insiders leaked that Meghan's creative vision often clashed with the experienced producers assigned to her. There were disagreements about tone, structure, and messaging. One anonymous executive went so far as to say, "They want to be storytellers, but they're not willing to listen to anyone else's story." The public began to notice too. The initial fascination turned to fatigue. Some started asking why, With all their money and access, Meghan and Harry were struggling to create meaningful content. Social media turned ruthless. Satire shows poked fun. And for the first time since their departure from the royal family, the couple felt the sting of being publicly questioned in the very world they thought would embrace them. Behind the scenes, things weren't any easier. Sources claimed that Netflix had become increasingly frustrated. Meghan's team had reportedly promised a steady slate of ideas, but after months, nothing concrete was delivered. Meetings were missed. Notes were ignored. Costs ballooned. It became clear that Meghan's creative ambitions were not translating into viable projects. And yet, she persisted. Insiders say she believed that her name alone would guarantee relevance, that her personal journey was enough to justify the investment. But in an industry where content is king and performance trumps pedigree, patience began to wear thin. Netflix, once so eager to be associated with the Sussexes, started to retreat. Quietly, the company stopped hyping their collaboration. Promos became scarce. Then came the final blow. In a brutal yet carefully worded statement, Netflix confirmed that they would not be renewing any of the remaining proposed projects under the Sussexes' Archwell production umbrella. The partnership was effectively over, not with scandal, but with silence. No farewell tour. No second chances. Just a door, gently but firmly closed. The fallout was immediate. Meghan was blindsided. According to one source close to the couple, she had built her public identity around the Netflix platform. Without it, the media brand she had hoped to craft was left in limbo. She had spoken about redefining narrative, reclaiming space, and changing the world. But now, with no platform, what could she redefine? For Meghan, this wasn't just a professional setback. It was personal. She saw the Netflix partnership as a validation of her post-royal identity, a symbol of power on her own terms. Without it, she wasn't just a duchess in exile, she was a brand without a buyer. Prince Harry, reportedly more grounded about the realities of show business, took the news with quiet frustration. He had voiced concerns early on about overpromising, but even he didn't expect such a swift collapse. The couple, once viewed as the future of progressive royalty, were now being whispered about in boardrooms as a cautionary tale. And this is when the whispers began. About Markus, about the meetings, about the billionaire. Because in Hollywood, failure isn't always fatal if you know the right people. And Meghan knew Markus Anderson. He'd seen the industry chew up and spit out brighter stars. He understood the terrain. And more importantly, he understood Meghan, knew her strengths, her insecurities, her need to remain visible to prove everyone wrong. If anyone could orchestrate her comeback, or at least find her a powerful new ally, it was Markus. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Just weeks after Netflix quietly severed ties, Meghan was seen with Markus more frequently. At cafes, on private terraces, slipping into gated driveways away from prying eyes. And then came the reports. A meeting. A hotel. A man whose influence dwarfed even the studios. No one knew exactly who this billionaire was. Only that he was older, powerful, and discreet. A known fixer. Someone who saw value where others saw risk. Someone who might be looking to invest, not just in content, but in people. And Meghan? She had become the perfect storm. Fallen but not forgotten. Ambitious but vulnerable. Controversial but captivating. A gamble, but one that Markus, it seemed, was willing to broker. This wasn't just about replacing Netflix. This was about rewriting the entire strategy. Meghan, free from the pressures of corporate expectations, aligning with a single power player who could back her projects, protect her interests, and elevate her back to global relevance. But at what cost? That was the unspoken question in every whisper. Because deals like this are never just about money. They're about leverage, control, loyalty. They come with expectations, with quiet obligations. They require trust, and often, silence. This meeting at the LA hotel wasn't just a networking session. It was a crossroads. For Meghan, it represented a chance to regain control, to rebuild what had crumbled. But for others watching, the media, the public, even the palace, it was a sign that Meghan Markle, the Duchess-turned-producer, was not going down without a fight, and that her next move wouldn't come through royal titles or corporate partnerships. It would come through shadows, secrets, and the man waiting behind a closed hotel door. He's rarely photographed, almost never quoted, but his presence lingers in the margins of every major chapter of Meghan Markle's life, quietly orchestrating the backdrop of a story that has been anything but subtle. Markus Anderson isn't a name known to most of the world, yet in the corridors of influence, he's the man you call when appearances must be made, narratives must be polished, and powerful people must be connected. He is not just Meghan Markle's friend. He's her architect, her fixer, her constant shadow. Their friendship began long before royal weddings and international headlines. Markus was already a fixture in the elite social scenes of New York, Toronto, and London, known primarily through his work with Soho House, the private members club that has become a sanctuary for celebrities, socialites, and power brokers alike. Markus didn't just work for Soho House, he embodied it. He cultivated spaces where power could mingle with privacy. And it was there, in those carefully curated social circles, that he met a young, ambitious actress named Meghan Markle. Meghan, still filming Suits at the time, wasn't yet the household name she would become. But she had drive, charisma, and a hunger for something bigger. Markus saw that. He introduced her to the right people, opened the right doors, and slowly, steadily, helped shape her image. He was never loud about it. He didn't post selfies or give interviews. He operated in the shadows, discreet, efficient, loyal. When Meghan and Harry's relationship first hit the press, it was Markus who had reportedly arranged their early dates. When the scrutiny intensified, Markus was said to be the one who offered Meghan refuge in Soho House locations around the world. When Meghan faced the unrelenting British tabloids, Markus was there, often just out of frame, always watching, always guiding. And when she left the royal family, Markus wasn't far behind. He attended the Invictus Games in Toronto. He appeared at private dinners and low-key social events in LA. Whenever Meghan re-emerged publicly, Markus wasn't far away. To some, he was just a best friend. To others, a handler. But in Hollywood, the line between personal and professional is often razor-thin. Markus Anderson knows things. He knows how power works. He understands how reputations are made and destroyed. He's been in the rooms where careers are decided with a handshake. That's what makes him dangerous and invaluable. So when Meghan's Netflix empire began to crumble, it wasn't a surprise that Markus became more visible again. Not to the public, of course, but within the circles that mattered. Meghan needed a comeback. Markus knew how to manufacture one, not with headlines or press conferences, but with access. And that's what made this moment so chillingly calculated. It wasn't about reconnecting. It was about repositioning. Insiders say Markus understood that Meghan's public appeal had changed. She was no longer the fresh, new Duchess with a global fan base. She was polarizing now, a figure of controversy. Brands were cautious. Studios were skeptical. And in that kind of climate, traditional routes wouldn't work. What she needed was someone powerful enough to ignore public opinion. Someone who didn't need her to be popular, only useful. And so, the meeting was arranged. Markus, sources claim, had been in contact with this billionaire for months. The man in question was older, immensely wealthy, and almost pathologically private. He wasn't known for flashy parties or red carpets. His power came from behind the scenes, through board memberships, shadow investments, and political donations. He had a history of elevating celebrities whose reputations had suffered. But not for free. Never for free. Markus had seen it before. The quiet alignments. The discreet favors. The promises never written down, but always enforced. And yet, this was the game he was willing to play, for Meghan. The trust between them ran deep. Some say deeper than most of Meghan's other relationships. Markus was there when she was still climbing. He'd witnessed the transformation from actress to duchess to media mogul in waiting. He believed in her, perhaps more than anyone else did. But this belief wasn't sentimental. It was strategic. If Meghan succeeded, Markus succeeded. Their fates were, in some ways, intertwined. And he knew how to read the signs. He saw the Netflix deals collapse not just as a failure, but an opportunity. A chance to pivot Meghan away from the corporate bureaucracy of Hollywood and into a more elite, insulated power structure. One where influence didn't require mass approval. One where loyalty to a single benefactor mattered more than audience ratings. Arranging the meeting was no small feat. Discretion was paramount. The location. A luxury hotel in the hills of Los Angeles. Not the type celebrities are seen exiting, but the kind where they go to vanish. Staff were reportedly told to turn off security cameras in certain corridors. Phones were banned. Entry was limited to pre-cleared names. The kind of security you'd expect not for a movie star, but for a foreign dignitary. Markus handled all of it. He coordinated the arrival. He kept Meghan's team in the dark. Even Harry, according to some, wasn't aware of the true nature of the meeting until after it had occurred. To those who know Markus, this wasn't shocking. He operates on a need-to-know basis. He doesn't ask for permission. He acts. And he does so with the confidence of someone who's never had to explain himself. What he saw in this billionaire was a lifeline. And what he offered him, in return, was access. To Meghan. To her brand. To her narrative. For all her critics, Meghan still holds immense cultural capital. She commands attention. She shapes conversation. She is a symbol of rebellion, of reinvention, of resilience. To the right buyer, that's worth more than 100 production deals. That's influence. And influence, in the right hands, becomes power. The question is, what did Markus promise? What did Meghan agree to? Some sources say it was about financing. That this billionaire was prepared to fund Meghan's next slate of projects independently, bypassing traditional platforms entirely. Others claim it was about political access, that this man had ambitions beyond business and saw Meghan as a possible spokesperson or cultural emissary. And there are those who whisper darker theories of control, leverage, and quiet obligations. But here's what we do know. Markus Anderson does not take risks lightly. He doesn't bet on lost causes. If he arranged this meeting, he believes there is something left in Meghan that can be sold or saved. And if the price is her independence, her marriage, or her public image, that's a cost she may already have considered. Because in Markus's world, outcomes matter more than opinions. And survival often means surrendering to forces larger than yourself. He has no Instagram, no publicist, no Vanity Fair cover or Hollywood Walk of Fame star. He rarely gives interviews. Yet when he enters a room, even the most powerful people notice. They stand straighter. They listen harder. Because the man who allegedly met Meghan Markle behind closed doors in a luxury Los Angeles hotel isn't famous. He's feared. And in elite circles, that's worth more than any spotlight. He's been called a ghost investor, a puppet master, a recluse with the mind of a CEO and the instincts of a casino boss. His official biography is sparse. Born in the American Midwest, raised in modest circumstances, built a business empire in the 80s through a controversial merger in the defense sector. What came next was a whirlwind of calculated moves into pharmaceuticals, private media, clean energy, and most notably, the entertainment industry. But not in the way most billionaires approach it. He didn't buy studios or sign stars. He bought silence, backed media outlets indirectly, funded talent agencies quietly, made donations to film academies through shell foundations. In doing so, he didn't just build wealth, he built influence. And that's what made him dangerous. Because in a world where celebrity is currency and media controls the narrative, this billionaire didn't just collect assets, he collected people. Stars on the edge of relevance. Journalists willing to bend. Former politicians with favors to trade. People like Meghan Markle, whose public persona could still command headlines, even if her latest projects could not. It wasn't the first time he'd stepped in when a public figure's career had stalled. Years earlier, he had allegedly funded the comeback of a once-shamed actress who'd been dropped by every major studio. Within months, she reappeared on magazine covers and secured an Oscar-nominated role. Those in the know credited a mysterious financier. They whispered his name, but never on record. No one wanted to find themselves on the wrong side of a man who could buy and bury stories with the same hand. He didn't seek gratitude. He expected loyalty. That was the currency he traded in. And once you were inside his web, you didn't leave. At least, not cleanly. So when reports emerged that Meghan Markle had met with such a man, eyebrows weren't just raised, they were alarmed. Why would a woman with such a volatile public image align herself with someone so shadowed? Why now? And what did he see in her? To understand that, one must understand timing. Meghan was at a crossroads. The collapse of the Netflix deal wasn't just a professional embarrassment. It was a very public indicator that the Hollywood elite no longer viewed her as a reliable partner. She had tried to position herself as a creative visionary, but her projects were consistently delayed, diluted, or dismissed. Her ability to control the media narrative, once her strongest weapon, had started to falter. But she still had one invaluable asset: her name. Despite the criticism, the controversy, and the fatigue, Meghan Markle remained a topic people couldn't ignore. Whether loved or loathed, she guaranteed engagement. And in a digital economy fueled by attention, that meant she still held value. That was all the billionaire needed. To him, she wasn't a failed producer. She was a wild card, a public figure with high recognition and a fractured reputation, the exact kind of figure he could mold. His interest wasn't in her documentary scripts or podcast concepts. His interest was in the narrative potential she represented. There are rumors that he offered her a private content fund, tens of millions in discretionary capital to pursue independent productions. The idea was to bypass traditional gatekeepers like Netflix or Spotify and go directly to audience-controlled platforms, premium streaming apps, high-traffic social media channels, proprietary distribution networks. She wouldn't need to pitch anymore. She'd have her own platform. But such a deal, if true, would come with strings. Editorial oversight, control over messaging, perhaps even direct influence over who appears in the content and what causes are endorsed. More concerning were whispers about a longer game. Some sources claim the billionaire saw in Meghan an opportunity not just for media, but for soft diplomacy. She was American, biracial, once royal, and globally recognized. In the right circumstances, she could be elevated beyond Hollywood into the world of international influence. Conferences, keynote speeches, behind-the-scenes lobbying. She could become a cultural ambassador. And through her, he could open doors. Whether Meghan understood all of this, no one knows. But those closest to her say she was intrigued by the offer. Tired of asking for approval from streaming executives, she welcomed the idea of creative freedom, even if it came under another man's thumb. And that meeting, quiet as it was, sent ripples through Los Angeles. Industry insiders began talking, not publicly, but at dinners, in phone calls, in DMs that vanished after being read. They spoke of the hotel, the closed-off suite, the car with tinted windows, Markus Anderson's presence, Meghan's silence afterward. Something had changed. Her tone, her team, even her wardrobe choices in the days that followed seemed to reflect a strategic recalibration. Gone were the soft pastels and California casuals. In came the sharp lines, the monochromes, the posture of a woman no longer playing to the masses but preparing for battle. It wasn't just speculation. Within a month, her name began surfacing again, this time attached to new ventures. A new lifestyle brand, with premium price tags and vague affiliations. A rumored memoir addendum. An appearance scheduled at a closed-door summit on female leadership in media and governance, heavily funded by undisclosed donors. And behind every one of these moves, whispers of one constant: the billionaire. Some say he operates through intermediaries, never directly contacting the figures he supports. Others insist he's hands-on, a control freak who demands daily updates and strategic oversight. No one can agree on the extent of his involvement, but everyone agrees he is now in Meghan's orbit. And this raises a disturbing possibility. What if Meghan's new rise is less of a comeback and more of a contract? What if her next chapter isn't about creativity or redemption, but control? The billionaire doesn't work with equals. He cultivates dependencies. He offers protection, then demands precision. Those who thrive under him do so at the expense of freedom. Those who rebel often find their bridges burned behind them before they even know they're running. Meghan has always been fiercely independent. Her exit from the royal family was framed around freedom. Her brand, even in chaos, has been about self-determination. And yet now, her future may rest in the hands of a man who's never cared about storytelling, only about strategy. In aligning with him, she may gain power, but she may also lose the one thing she's fought hardest to preserve: her voice. And for a woman who has spent years reclaiming her narrative, that may be the most ironic twist of all. The truth doesn't always come in headlines. Often, it's buried in the unnoticed, in a valet's recollection, a hotel staffer's nervous glance, or the curious absence of a name from a guest log that should have included it. That's the reality when you're dealing with power, real power. The kind of power that makes things vanish or appear depending on whose interest it serves. And that's exactly what happened on the evening Meghan Markle entered one of Los Angeles's most exclusive hotels accompanied by Markus Anderson and walked into a meeting that could change everything. This wasn't the kind of hotel frequented by tourists or influencers chasing clout. This was a fortress, ultra-discreet, frequented by foreign dignitaries, Fortune 500 CEOs, and the kind of celebrities who don't want to be seen. No red carpets. No paparazzi. The only flashbulbs were hidden behind biometric security doors. Meghan arrived just after sunset. The car, matte black, unmarked, windows heavily tinted, rolled quietly into the underground garage. There were no assistants, no handlers. Only Markus, seated beside her, phone off, posture tense. The hotel's private elevator had already been secured. The top-floor suite had been cleared of all personnel not handpicked by the Billionaire's team. Security detail had replaced regular staff hours earlier. To the untrained eye, this was just another high-profile guest entering a five-star hotel. But to those who paid attention, and there were always a few, this was different. One junior staffer, speaking on condition of anonymity, later told a friend, there was a shift in the air. Everyone was told to look away. Phones locked. Even the head concierge was kept out of the loop. That friend, of course, posted the details online. The post vanished within hours, but not before screenshots circulated. Those who knew Meghan well noted something unusual too. Her attire that night, sleek black trousers, a sharply tailored jacket, minimalist jewelry, was a marked departure from her recent soft-lens California aesthetic. This wasn't a woman coming to negotiate a creative pitch. This was someone stepping into a high-stakes room, serious, controlled, calculating. And inside that suite, that's where the mystery deepens. According to whispers from the billionaire's usual business circle, the suite had been modified in advance. No audio recordings. No Wi-Fi-enabled devices. Handshakes, not contracts. An atmosphere of implicit understanding, not legalese. It's believed the meeting lasted just over 2 hours. Meghan and Markus entered together. Only Meghan spoke. Markus remained seated a few feet behind, silent, watching. The billionaire, flanked by a single advisor, did most of the talking. Reports suggest there were no overt offers, just suggestions, possibilities, alignments. What would it look like, he allegedly asked, if she had full creative control, unlimited budget, and zero editorial interference? What if the next phase of her career was not dependent on platforms like Netflix or Spotify? What if she could operate independently, with global distribution partners chosen based on loyalty, not trend? There was mention, too, of narrative, of control, of storytelling at scale, not just entertainment, influence. The billionaire, by some accounts, referred to it as impact diplomacy, using personality and press to shape perception. It wasn't a media deal. It was a strategic placement. Meghan reportedly listened intently, asked few questions, and never interrupted. There was no signing of contracts, no toasts, no social photos to leak. Just a brief nod when it was over, a polite thank you, and a subtle glance exchanged between her and Markus as they exited the suite. Those watching noted that she didn't speak again until the car doors closed behind them. So what was agreed in that room? Nothing formally, but everything, potentially. The billionaire had extended an unspoken invitation, one Meghan could either accept in spirit or decline in silence. If she agreed, she would become part of something larger than production credits and platform algorithms. She would enter a web where decisions were made in private, power operated without optics, and loyalty was more valued than legacy. And perhaps that's why this meeting, though cloaked in secrecy, began leaking in fragments. Because some people, aides, ex-staffers, silent observers, didn't like what they saw. They'd watched Meghan over the years transform from actress to duchess, from duchess to rebel, from rebel to content creator. But now, they feared, she was becoming something else, a brand without borders, a figure willing to trade narrative independence for strategic utility. And that's when the questions began to swirl. Had Meghan just entered into an unwritten agreement with a man whose reputation was built on control? Did she even understand the magnitude of what she was walking into? Was Markus acting on her behalf, or guiding her toward a future she wasn't prepared for? Those close to the royal family started to take notice too. Quiet inquiries were made. Aides in Montecito were asked to confirm Meghan's whereabouts that evening. Journalists began connecting dots between recent shifts in Meghan's team and known associates of the billionaire. Meanwhile, Meghan herself remained completely silent. No denial, no acknowledgement, no casual Instagram post to shift attention. Just stillness, a calculated retreat into quiet. But silence, especially from someone who once told Oprah she was ready to speak her truth, speaks volumes. In the days that followed, her public movements grew even more tightly controlled. There were no coffee shop paparazzi moments, no PR-crafted school visits, no surprise Zoom appearances, only a single public event, a brief, controlled panel on women in power, where Meghan spoke softly, cautiously, and made sure to avoid any reference to future media plans. But behind the curtain, movement continued. Domain registrations connected to a new personal initiative popped up, all through Shell LLCs. A new communications advisor, previously linked to a global lobbying firm, was hired. A long-abandoned trademark, filed years ago during her Suits days, was suddenly renewed. These were not coincidences. They were preparations. The hotel meeting was the ignition point, and everything since has been motion. But perhaps the most chilling detail came from an anonymous leak, one no outlet dared publish directly. A line, reportedly said by the billionaire during that private suite conversation. "You've been telling the world your story. Now let us help shape how the world sees you." A generous offer? Or a warning cloaked in charm? Either way, Meghan didn't walk out of that hotel the same woman she was when she entered. Something had shifted. A line had been crossed. And the question now isn't whether that night changed her future. It's how far she's willing to go to protect it. In the days and weeks following Meghan's quiet meeting with the elusive billionaire, one figure remained conspicuously absent from all the commotion: Prince Harry. For a man who once declared that he left the royal family to protect his wife, to preserve his family, and to live a life of integrity and purpose, his silence was deafening. No statements, no joint appearances, no carefully choreographed family moments. Just a void, a growing distance, both literal and emotional. Observers began to take notice. There had been no photos of the couple together for weeks. Meghan appeared at a women's event alone. Harry was seen at a charity polo match in Santa Barbara without her. Rumors intensified. Had the billionaire meeting driven a wedge between them? Was Harry in the loop or being left behind? Insiders close to the Sussex household claimed that Harry had initially been unaware of the depth of Meghan's involvement with Markus's new contact. According to one account, Harry had been traveling in Europe under the radar, handling residual matters related to their remaining charitable foundations. It wasn't until his return to Montecito that he heard whispers from within his own staff. Whispers about a hotel suite, a private meeting, and a man whose name raised more alarms than applause. It wasn't the first time Harry had questioned the people surrounding Meghan. Throughout their relationship, he had often clashed with her team, worried that they were more concerned with optics than with real strategy. Markus Anderson had always been something of a wild card. Harry respected his loyalty, but was wary of his reach. Markus had a history of bringing people into Meghan's world, sometimes without fully explaining their motives. And now, he'd brought in someone who didn't just come with resources. He came with consequences. Those close to Harry describe him as torn. On one hand, he knew that Meghan was frustrated. He had watched as deal after deal either collapsed or underperformed. He understood her desperation to prove herself, to show the world she wasn't just riding the coattails of royalty, but blazing a trail of her own. But on the other hand, this new alliance felt off. There was a darkness to it, a sense of calculation that didn't sit right with him. He started asking questions. Quietly at first, he requested a briefing from Meghan's new advisor, a man he had never met. The meeting was delayed. When it finally happened, it was short, vague, and filled with talking points. Harry reportedly left the room with more questions than answers. Meghan, meanwhile, remained elusive. She told him that the meeting was exploratory, nothing binding, just a conversation. She said it was about reclaiming agency, about bypassing the gatekeepers who had never truly understood her story. She reminded him of how often they had been burned by institutions. This time, she insisted, they could control everything. But Harry saw through the language. He had been in enough rooms of influence to know what real control looks like, and how easily it slips away. He had lived it at Buckingham Palace. He knew that when someone says, "You're free to choose," they usually mean, choose what I've already decided. He tried to press further, but Meghan became guarded. She told him not to worry, that Markus had it handled, that this billionaire wasn't like the others, that this time, they were finally on the inside, not begging from the outside. But Harry couldn't let it go. He reached out to former colleagues in London, old friends in diplomatic circles, even a security contact he'd kept since his military days. He asked for a background check, unofficial, discreet. The results didn't come back with anything illegal, but they did come with stories. Stories of deals made with rising political figures, then revoked when they no longer served a purpose. Stories of celebrity endorsements that turned into lifetime contracts. Stories of people who tried to walk away, only to find their reputations suddenly crumbling without warning. Harry was rattled. He confronted Markus, demanding to know what exactly had been discussed in that hotel suite. Markus was polite, evasive, even slightly amused. He told Harry that the world had changed, and that influence didn't come from institutions anymore, but from networks. That Meghan had every right to explore new paths. That Harry should trust her. Trust. The very thing their marriage had been built on. The thing that now felt increasingly frayed. Behind closed doors, the tension began to mount. Meghan insisted she was doing what was necessary for both of them. Harry worried she was doing what was irreversible. There were arguments. Long nights of silence. Days spent in different wings of their Montecito estate. Staff began to notice. One aide described the atmosphere as thick with unspoken tension. And through it all, Harry kept coming back to the same question. Why had he been left out? He had given up everything for Meghan. His family, his military appointments, his titles, his home. He had stood beside her in every crisis, defended her in every interview. And now, in this most critical moment, he was watching her move ahead, alone, or worse, with someone else pulling the strings. It wasn't about control. It was about partnership. He tried to reconnect, suggested they do a public appearance together, a joint statement, a shared project. Meghan declined, saying it was too soon, that the timing wasn't right, that things were in motion. Things. What things? Harry felt them slipping further apart, not through malice, but through momentum. Meghan was accelerating into a new world, one he didn't fully understand and wasn't sure he wanted to be a part of. The final straw came during a dinner at their home, meant to be casual. Meghan had invited a handful of new advisors, including one of the billionaire's longtime legal associates. Harry wasn't informed until an hour before. The conversation that evening was all strategy, branding, partnerships. Harry, once the centerpiece of their joint narrative, felt like a guest at his own table. Afterwards, he walked alone through the garden, hands in pockets, head low. A security guard later said he looked more like a man preparing to leave than one settling in. He didn't leave. Not yet. But something inside him shifted. Because this wasn't the dream they had fled the palace to create. This was something else entirely. And for the first time, Harry wasn't sure if they were still fighting for the same future, or if Meghan had already chosen a different one. For months, Meghan Markle had appeared to be on a treadmill of dead ends. Failed deals, withering support from former allies, mounting criticism from media outlets once eager to champion her cause. It was a narrative spiral that threatened to unravel everything she had built since stepping away from royal life. But for those who know her well, there was never any doubt she had a contingency. Meghan is not a woman who walks into failure without an exit strategy. And as whispers began to rise around that infamous hotel meeting, so too did speculation of a deeper, more ambitious plan. A plan B that wasn't merely a pivot, but a complete reinvention. This was not about salvaging the past. It was about rewriting the future. Those within Meghan's inner circle began noticing changes as early as 3 months prior to the Netflix deal's collapse. Certain domain names were quietly registered under newly formed LLCs. Her media team began speaking less about documentaries and podcasts and more about personal storytelling platforms. A former political communications expert was hired under a wellness title, an odd fit, unless one knew what was coming. Meghan, some say, had already begun laying the groundwork for a move away from traditional media deals, the kind that required collaboration, editorial oversight, and, most importantly, compromise. Her experience with Netflix had left her bruised, not just by the public failure, but by the restrictions. For someone used to controlling her own story, Meghan had reportedly found the studio system suffocating. So she began asking questions. Who controlled digital space? Who held the real levers of attention in a decentralized media world? She didn't want to pitch anymore. She wanted ownership. This thinking, according to those who tracked her moves, aligned perfectly with the billionaire's offer. He wasn't offering her a role in someone else's vision. He was offering her the tools to build her own. A platform, a network, a pipeline to distribute content directly. Bypassing studios, critics, and skeptics. No boardroom approvals. No feedback loops. Just direct-to-audience storytelling, backed by financial firepower and strategic precision. And this is where the Plan B became something altogether more sophisticated and potentially more dangerous. One version of the plan, shared by a source within a Hollywood distribution agency, described a new brand Meghan was developing. Not a lifestyle brand in the traditional sense. This wasn't about makeup or cookware. It was about influence. A hybrid of personal branding, curated media output, live events, and high-dollar mentorship summits aimed at high-net-worth women seeking public transformation. Think Goop meets Davos, but with a royal edge and American polish. The brand name was under lock and key. So were the visuals. But conversations were being had with former producers, brand designers, and political strategists. There were talks of podcasts returning, but this time fully owned. Short films about women's rights. Web-based courses on navigating power dynamics in corporate environments. A storytelling app tailored to spotlight marginalized voices, with Meghan, of course, as the guiding light. It sounded ambitious. It also sounded incredibly lonely. Because in the development of this Plan B, Prince Harry's name was reportedly mentioned less and less. Not because he wasn't supportive, but because he wasn't part of the engine. Meghan's vision, as described by several sources, didn't hinge on being part of a royal duo anymore. It was about standing alone, not in defiance, but in declaration. She always had a solo brand in her mind, one insider shared. Being a duchess gave her visibility, but it was never meant to define her. That was just chapter 2. She's already writing chapter 4. But what troubled some observers was the nature of the support she was receiving to build this chapter. The billionaire's presence in Meghan's planning, though unofficial, was undeniable. A digital fund tied to one of his known shell companies was spotted investing heavily in influencer tech startups shortly after the hotel meeting. 2 of Meghan's new advisors previously worked in entities owned or influenced by his conglomerate. And meetings, not publicized, not posted, continued quietly in LA, New York, and even Dubai. This wasn't just Plan B. This was empire building. The question became, at what cost? Those with long memories recalled how quickly Meghan had pivoted after her engagement to Harry, from actress to activist to duchess to rebel. Each shift was calculated, strategic, but also risky. With every reinvention, she lost support from the audience she left behind. The Hollywood elite who once cheered her independence now viewed her as unpredictable. The British public, already skeptical, saw every move as further confirmation of self-interest. Even progressive media began to question her motives. Now, with this new plan, rooted in shadow deals, mystery financing, and behind-the-scenes power brokers, the risk was not just reputational. It was relational. Former allies were growing distant. Journalists once friendly to Meghan's cause no longer took her team's calls. One prominent editor allegedly said, "She's becoming unreadable. We can't tell what her next move is, and that makes people nervous." But Meghan didn't seem fazed. She stopped engaging in defensive PR. She declined several high-profile interviews. She pulled back from Instagram. She didn't even respond to news outlets that requested clarification about her hotel meeting. Silence had become part of the strategy, or the illusion of strategy. Because when no one knows your plan, they can't preempt it. Behind closed doors, her energy was focused on development. Strategy decks were being drafted. Visual concepts revised. Early partner meetings held over encrypted video calls. She was building something, whether the world wanted it or not. What became clear, however, was that this wasn't about fame anymore. Meghan had already tasted global visibility and the backlash that came with it. This time, it was about power. Real power. The kind that isn't granted by titles or deals, but cultivated through networks. The kind that doesn't require adoration, just relevance. The kind that endures. And yet, in chasing that, she may be giving up something more important: trust. From Harry, from the public, from even her oldest confidants, some of whom have reportedly stepped back, unsure of who Meghan is now compared to who she was just 5 years ago. Because when a person transforms too often, too quickly, it becomes hard to know what's real and what's just the current iteration. Meghan's plan B may yet become the defining pivot of her life, but whether it elevates her to the level she's always sought or isolates her in a tower of her own making is a story still unfolding. The promise was tantalizing: creative freedom, and censored storytelling, and a platform built entirely around her voice. For Meghan Markle, it must have felt like the offer of a lifetime. No more middlemen. No more judgmental executives picking apart every idea. Just her, backed by a faceless empire, empowered to produce whatever she wanted. But in the world Meghan was stepping into, nothing is ever that simple. Especially not when the offer comes from a man known for his invisible hand in powerful places. A man who rarely gives, without expecting everything in return. As more details about the billionaire's influence seeped through private industry circles, a new question took shape. One that was far more unsettling than those that came before. What exactly did Meghan agree to? This wasn't a traditional business arrangement. There were no contracts filed with the Screen Actors Guild, no announcements splashed across the trades. It was all hush-hush, filtered through Markus Anderson, whispered about in penthouses and private jets. That alone made insiders nervous. When deals happen in the dark, it usually means the stakes are too high for daylight. The billionaire, according to former associates, has a pattern. He doesn't deal in half measures. He backs people completely, and in return, he expects complete control, not through brute force, but through dependency. He makes himself indispensable. He makes you feel like no one else believes in you. No one else can make your vision happen. And by the time you realize the walls are closing in, it's too late to run. And that's the concern with Meghan's new venture. That this isn't really her plan B at all. That it's someone else's vision, wearing her face, using her voice, but shaped entirely by the motives of a man who doesn't care about storytelling, only power. Some of the signs are already showing. The people now orbiting Meghan, advisors, consultants, legal minds, many have indirect connections to the billionaire's network. One used to serve on the board of a political lobbying firm he bankrolls. Another previously ran crisis communications for a high-profile figure whose downfall was linked to one of the billionaire's failed ventures. These aren't the media creatives Meghan used to surround herself with. They're fixers, operatives, professionals trained to manage perception and secure strategic outcomes. More worrying still are the clauses buried within proposed sponsorship documents for Meghan's new brand, allegedly reviewed by a business associate of a former partner. These clauses include language about non-competitive narrative rights, exclusive access to public appearances, and approval authority on third-party partnerships. In plain English, control, not just over Meghan's work, but over how, when, and where she appears to the world. It's the kind of language that should set off alarms. But perhaps Meghan, focused on finally regaining momentum, chose not to read too closely. Or maybe she did, and accepted the trade. Because that's the reality no one wants to say out loud. That Meghan may know exactly what she's walking into. That after years of struggling to control her narrative, she's chosen to hand over the keys to someone more powerful, as long as she can stay in the spotlight. The irony is almost painful. She left the royal family citing lack of freedom. She walked away from Netflix after creative interference. She condemned the British tabloids for manipulating her story. And now she may be entering a deal that makes all those institutions look lenient by comparison. Some insiders describe it as a Faustian bargain, the classic tale of trading one's soul for success. But in this case, it's subtler. No devil with horns, just a billionaire with a calm smile and a sprawling portfolio of influence. No flaming contracts, just long NDA agreements and back-channel meetings. No overt demands. Just expectations that grow with every dollar invested. There's also the question of image. Meghan has built her brand on empowerment, feminism, and personal agency. She's spoken about mental health, about female leadership, about breaking the mold. Aligning herself with a man whose business practices have long been questioned, not legally, but ethically, raises concerns about consistency. How can she speak about transparency and advocacy while being propped up by someone who operates in complete opacity? Even her fan base has noticed. Online forums once filled with praise have grown uneasy. Longtime supporters ask why she's making moves that don't match her previous ethos. Some speculate that she's lost herself. Others insist this is who she always was, just unmasked by circumstance. But perhaps the most uncomfortable question is not whether Meghan knew what she was agreeing to, but whether she felt she had a choice. Because after the Netflix debacle, the Spotify fallout, and the relentless media backlash, maybe Meghan saw this billionaire not as a trap, but as her last chance. Maybe she didn't want to risk another failure. Maybe she couldn't afford to start over again. That's the cruel truth of high-profile reinvention. It often comes with invisible costs. You don't sign your name. You don't shake hands in public. But you feel the pressure. You feel the weight of someone else's investment in your success. And soon, your story isn't yours anymore. It becomes a product, shaped, timed, distributed. You become a vessel. Some close to Meghan insist she's still in control, that she's sharper than people realize, that she knows how to leverage the billionaire's network without losing herself. They point to her previous success with TIG, her early acting roles where she outmaneuvered casting directors, her resilience in facing royal scrutiny. But others aren't so sure. One former advisor, who parted ways with Meghan during the early days of Archewell, said it plainly. Meghan is brilliant, but she's exhausted. And that's when people make mistakes. That's when they let others take over. And if that's true, then the question becomes not what Meghan has agreed to, but how long it will take before she realizes the price. Because there's always a price. Whether it's creative control, personal privacy, marital harmony, public trust. When you enter into a deal like this, you don't just receive money or influence. You accept expectations. You accept someone else's timing, agenda, vision. You lose the right to simply walk away. And when the time comes that you want out, as it always does, the door won't open as easily as it once closed behind you. Meghan may still believe she's calling the shots. But if the whispers are true, if this alliance with the billionaire is as deep and binding as it now appears, then she may already be standing in a story she no longer authors. Every move in the world of power comes with a ripple effect, and Meghan Markle's secretive meeting with a shadowy billionaire was no exception. The silence that followed was not the calm before a storm. It was the storm itself, disguised in velvet. From the outside, everything seemed contained. No official announcement. No press statements. No scandal splashed across tabloid front pages. But within the elite circles of Hollywood, royal watchers, and political insiders, the whispers began to grow louder. Whispers that sounded a lot like betrayal. The first tremor came from within Meghan's own camp. Several key staffers who had stood by her since the Archewell launch were either dismissed quietly or left voluntarily. One insider claimed that a longtime PR consultant, known for defending Meghan through thick and thin, had been abruptly shut out of strategic meetings following the billionaire encounter. She wasn't just out of the room, the source noted. She was erased from the building. Another employee, tasked with partnership outreach, reportedly discovered that her outreach efforts were being overridden by new channels linked to anonymous LLCs, companies allegedly set up under advisement from the billionaire's legal team. Overnight, Meghan's carefully built operation had become compartmentalized, cryptic, and tightly controlled. This sudden restructuring didn't go unnoticed. Former allies in media, especially those who had once written glowing profiles or moderated flattering interviews, found themselves ghosted. Requests for comments, updates, and feature opportunities were ignored. One editor confided that a planned cover story was canceled after Meghan's team stopped responding altogether. It's like they shut the blinds and locked the door, she said. And they're pretending we don't exist. And the public noticed. Meghan's base, once fiercely loyal, began to fracture. Hashtags defending her turned quiet. Fan accounts stopped posting daily affirmations. Even the supportive celebrity voices began to fall silent. Reese Witherspoon, Oprah, Serena Williams, all former champions, made no public gestures toward her new ventures. The conspicuous absence said more than words ever could. Why? Because association comes with risk. And the billionaire Meghan was now tied to came with baggage. Whispers about his influence began surfacing in unexpected places: late-night political podcasts, financial newsletters, even YouTube commentary channels. Though none of the mainstream outlets ran full exposés, the people paying attention were connecting dots. What was this man's long-term game? Why was he aligning with Meghan Markle, of all people? Was this just about money? Or was it something deeper? Control over a recognizable figure to influence conversations, shape public thought, or even test new channels of messaging. And then came the betrayal, not from Meghan herself, but from those she left behind. One former employee, who had signed an airtight non-disclosure agreement, posted a cryptic message online. Power doesn't corrupt. It just reveals who was always willing to cut you loose. It was quickly deleted, but screenshots flooded Reddit and Twitter. The implication was clear: Meghan had changed. Or rather, she had revealed a part of herself that had long been dormant. The strategist, the survivor, the one willing to cut ties to save herself. Former colleagues began reaching out to each other. Not in outrage, in disbelief. Meghan had always been careful to keep her circle close, to cultivate loyalty. But now, her inner circle wasn't a circle at all. It was a fortress, with Markus Anderson as the gatekeeper and the billionaire as the architect. Even Markus, once viewed as the gentle consigliere behind the scenes, began facing scrutiny. Some called him a handler. Others, a manipulator. Old friends of Meghan said he had become increasingly controlling, pushing her toward connections that served an invisible agenda. She trusts him completely, one said. And that's what scares us. What began as unease evolved into quiet rebellion. Leaks started flowing. Nothing definitive, no photos, no tapes, but enough to plant seeds. Descriptions of the hotel suite. Confirmations of flight logs. Tips about LLCs. Reports of meetings held in Monaco, in London, in Dubai. None of it damning on its own, but together, it painted a picture. Meghan was aligning with a network far outside her original mission of philanthropy and media independence. And that network, some believed, had plans that extended well beyond entertainment. Meanwhile, royal circles were watching closely. Inside palace walls, aides who had long washed their hands of the Sussex saga suddenly found renewed interest. Was this merely a personal pivot for Meghan? Or was it a signal that the Duchess, stripped of official duties but still carrying global recognition, was stepping into geopolitical terrain? For an institution as sensitive to image as the monarchy, the idea that Meghan could be used to shift influence in foreign markets was unsettling. No royal titles were needed for that. All she required was access. And with the billionaire's backing, she now had it. But back in California, Meghan was quiet. There were no rebuttals to the rumors. No carefully placed puff pieces. No re-engagement with her loyal base. Just silence, and the occasional whisper of new meetings, new ventures, new allies. Some believed she was laying low by design. Others thought the silence was a signal. She didn't need the public anymore. She had something bigger. And yet, cracks were starting to show. A second meeting with the billionaire, allegedly scheduled to finalize operational structures, was postponed indefinitely. A planned launch event for one of Meghan's new ventures was scaled back, then canceled entirely. Brands that had expressed interest were now re-evaluating optics, according to sources. This wasn't just backlash. It was resistance. The world Meghan once captivated, the journalists, the influencers, the woke elite, was starting to ask if she had gone too far. Had she traded authenticity for ambition? Empowerment for access? Had she chosen strategy over sincerity? Because if the goal was control, she was losing it. The more she distanced herself from the people who built her up, the more the narrative slipped away from her. She was no longer the woman who spoke openly to Oprah about pain and growth. She was no longer the feminist duchess pushing for change. She was someone else now, colder, quieter, hidden behind layers of strategy and influence. And that transformation, once so meticulously managed, was now exposed. Whether Meghan saw it or not, the backlash wasn't just noise. It was a reckoning, a test of whether her new alliances could survive the scrutiny, a test of whether her old supporters would still stand by her or walk away. And perhaps most importantly, it was a reminder of something Meghan may have forgotten. In a world built on relationships, you cannot rise alone, and you cannot abandon people without consequences.